Chapter 12. The captain, Urch, the other humans, and I sat in the briefing room. That is, the other humans besides Alice, who remained in the brig. I felt a twisting in my stomach, like I'd done something wrong and was about to get in serious trouble. The fact that everyone was staring at me didn't help, but I kept telling myself that it wasn't my fault. Not that it much mattered at this point. Alice was on board, and finger-pointing wasn't going to change that. The captain clicked his insectoid mandibles together. "None of you knew she was on the shuttle?" "Negative," Colonel Rage barked, speaking for all of us. He seemed to understand this was a serious matter with military implications, and he had instinctively taken over. "I knew," Smelly told me. "She was doing a lot of mouth breathing." I tried not to react. If Smelly had known about Alice, why hadn't it said anything? Obviously, I couldn't ask that now. "Captain Hyai," Colonel Rage said, "I questioned this young lady extensively back on Earth. It's my belief that she is simply an enthusiast. She has a history of being interested in beings from other worlds, and it seems clear that given such close proximity to aliens, she couldn't quite master her eagerness to see more." "You don't consider her to be a threat, then?" the captain asked. "Perhaps she is in league with the Fads." "When she was on the run with Zeke, we conducted an extensive background check on her. There's nothing to indicate she's anything other than what she says." "If the Fads wish to place an agent on board," Urch said, "I doubt they would choose one so obvious. The girl was going to be discovered eventually, and once discovered, she was always going to be an unwelcome guest."
"I very much doubt she is a spy," Charles said. "But that doesn't change the question. What is to become of her?"
"We cannot divert back to Earth," Captain Hyai said. "Director Glee Wixix wants us to make best possible speed to Confederation Central."
"Can't you send her back when we arrive?"
Niana asked. "Resources are spread quite thin these days," Captain Hyai said. "No one will authorize sending an insufficiently armed transport into territory still coveted by the Fads, and we cannot afford to send a battle-ready ship that might be needed elsewhere."
"If there's one thing that I get, it's allocation of resources," Colonel Rage said. "I understand you can't ferry this girl all over the galaxy. She's a stowaway, and you have to deal with her, but she's from my planet, and an American citizen, which means I need to look after her interests." "You sound like you have a proposal," Urch said. "Right you are, Warthog Alien. It seems to me you have two choices. You can charge her with whatever Confederation crimes she's guilty of, and deal with it through the legal system. But I'm against putting her through all that, since she hasn't really done or intended any harm. Your second choice is to let her out. Zeke can keep an eye on her, make sure she doesn't get into any more trouble." For some reason, this plan made me uncomfortable. I liked Alice, and I respected her. She'd given up a lot, and she'd taken some crazy risks in order to help me. But I didn't want to be her guide to the Confederation. Whatever the reason we had been summoned back, it was almost certainly bound to involve some risk. And I didn't like the idea of being responsible for keeping someone with no training out of harm's way. "I'm going to be busy with whatever Director Glee Wixix wants me to do," I protested. "Maybe we could put Niana in charge of keeping an eye on her." "I would rather not." Niana folded her arms and looked away like she'd remembered something really important she had to think about. "We can help guide her through Confederation Central," Misan offered. "But we're strangers to her. She knows Zeke. He probably should be the one to look out for her." "She's not a baby," I said. "It's not like you'll have to change her diapers. Just make sure she doesn't open an airlock or anger the locals." "I agree with your friend, Zeke," Colonel Rage said. "You brought her into this, and you need to see her through it." They were right, of course. And my vague worries about possible danger weren't enough to justify my position. On the other hand, I needed Alice to understand she couldn't go around breaking any rules she didn't like. Tamret was on the way, and one habitual lawbreaker in the group was enough. "Can I suggest leaving her in the brig until we arrive at the station?" Colonel Rage raised an eyebrow. "Explain." I shrugged. I agree she's no threat, but she flouted the law and got away with it. There are a lot of laws on Confederation Central, so maybe now's the time to make sure she'll think twice before doing anything else too impulsive. Urch snorted.
He wants to make sure she knows her place before the fiery Rarl shows up.
That, too, I admitted. Captain Hyai nodded.
Either way, I believe it is a sound suggestion. Make it so.
I stared at the captain for a second. He clacked his mandibles together.
The one called Charles asked me to say that. He thought you would appreciate it?
Charles grinned. We shall see which of us is the true fanboy. I went back to my room and closed the door. If you knew about Alice, why didn't you say anything? I demanded of Smelly.
It wasn't my problem. Besides, suppose I had told you. What could you have done? Announced that you'd picked up the rank stench of one of your females in the storage closet? If you had revealed your knowledge of her, you would have raised questions that you could not answer, and that might have led to the others learning of my existence.
She was hidden on the shuttle in the docking bay, I said. Did you know for a fact they wouldn't decompress the bay?
No, I recognized that decompression was a possibility.
She could have died.
That is true. You fleshy types don't do well in vacuum. You're so porous, and you require oxygen and warmth.
The next time someone's life is in danger, you have to let me know, I said. I'll cover my tracks to conceal you, but you can't risk letting anyone die.
There are billions of you, Smiley said, and countless billions more species that don't look exactly like you, but are otherwise barely indistinguishable, meat in different shaped bags. I am unique, and that means my existence is more valuable than your own. Next time, I shall behave precisely the same way.
I opened my mouth to speak, but there was nothing to say. I had always known it, but I think this was the first time I'd said it out quite so bluntly for myself. I had an intelligence inside my head that I could not control, or trust, or anticipate. One for whom sentient life, other than my own on which it depended, was utterly expendable. When I entered the brig, Nutjob was sitting in front of the panel making some adjustments. He turned around at the sound of the door opening and his nostrils flared.
Ah, he said, one criminal to visit another.
Hey, Nutjob, I said, trying for the casual approach. How's it going, my man?
It would be going more pleasantly, he said, if my ship were not contaminated by primitive life forms who cannot understand the rule of law and who wish to drag the Confederation into a pit of filth and degradation.
On my world, I said, when someone asks how it's going, you usually just say good and leave it at that.
Since you have mastered the art of pointless conversation, I'm surprised you do not already rule the galaxy.
I sighed, deciding to make one last effort. Here's the thing. Your uncle and I don't get along. I'm not sure what I could have done to avoid that, since he took issue with choices I made that seemed unavoidable. But you're not him. There's no reason we have to be enemies.
The reason, Nutjob said, is that you are a member of a degenerate species. And of that primitive rabble, you are the worst sort. You care nothing for law and order. You are selfish and greedy and violent. As long as you and your kind poison my air, I will despise you.
I was silent for a moment. I was hoping for a different response, but that's okay. You're telling me how you feel, which means we're making progress. In the meantime, can you give me a moment alone with Alice here?
So the two of you can plot your criminal mischief?
I just want to talk to her, okay? There won't be any mischief. Nutjob snorted.
The law states I must allow you to confer in private, and I shall comply because that is what advanced species do.
Apparently they also like to make self-important speeches. As soon as Nutjob was out of the room, I grabbed a chair and pulled it over so I could sit across from Alice. She sat alone on her bunk in the brig, running her fingers through her tangle of nearly white hair. As I sat down, she looked up at me through the blue film of the plasma barrier and flashed a huge grin like we were both in on this together.
Here I am, in outer space,
she said. Here you are, I agreed.
That guy,
She said, gesturing towards the door Nutjob had just walked out of.
he's got some serious issues. A lot of anger.
I may not invite him to my sleepover, I said.
He kept ranting about how violent species should be eliminated.
Did you point out the obvious logic problem?
Since I fall into the category of species he was talking about eliminating, I decided to smile and act harmless.
Probably a good strategy, I said. My usual approach of antagonize and alienate doesn't seem to be getting me very far. She adjusted her glasses and said nothing. I smiled and also said nothing.
I believe, Smelly said, this is what we call an awkward silence.
Smelly was right. In order to move things along, I said, so... And then I ran out of ideas. And it was back to the awkward silence.
So?
She agreed.
Can I get one of those data bracelets?
Are you kidding me? I snapped. Awkward silence time was done. Do you think this is some sort of vacation? You snuck aboard an alien spaceship. No one knew you were hiding out in the shuttle bay. You could have died.
And you could have been killed when we broke into Area 51,
she countered.
Sometimes you have to take risks.
Yeah, well, not this time. She sighed.
I'm sorry. I know my being here makes you look bad. But I had to see all this for myself. Besides, now that I'm here, I can help you.
I wouldn't have chosen to put her in danger by bringing her into all of this. But she was here, and I couldn't do anything about that. Having an extra person around who was brave and smart and loyal was probably not such a bad thing. I just needed to make sure that she and Tamret didn't clash. I braced myself for the most awkward question I'd ever had to ask someone. We're friends, right?
Of course we are, Zeke,
she said, clearly warming to this approach. It was more promising than, say, threatening to put her out an airlock. I mean, I'm making sure that's all we are. You don't, you know...
Like you?
She said, as though I'd suggested she might want to pass some time scrubbing alien toilets. I felt myself blushing, which probably should not have been a surprise, given that this was one of the most awkward conversations of my life. I'm not full of myself or anything. I don't want you to think that. It's just that Tamret can be kind of... intense. She clapped her hands together in excitement.
She's safe? You're getting her back.
Yeah, I just found out a little while ago.
I'm so happy for you.
Alice was grinning now.
For both of you.
I nodded. Thanks. Yeah, I'm pretty happy too. Alice rolled her eyes.
I promise not to steal her man, okay? She sounds really cool, and I don't want to insult her taste, but she has absolutely nothing to worry about. I mean, like, ever.
I stood up. Appreciated, though maybe making your case a little less forcefully would have worked just as well. She waved her hand.
Your ego can take it. If I'm bumming you out, go save another galaxy or something. You'll bounce back.
And one more thing, I said. Now that you're here, can you keep my little friend a secret? I tapped my head so she'd know I was talking about Smelly.
Can I ask why?
Better you don't. It's safer for me, which is all I can tell you for now. She was about to throw another question at me, but decided to hold her tongue.
Okay. Not a word.
Thanks. I turned to the door. I'll check on you later. If Nutjob starts sharpening knives in front of you, just shout as loudly as you can.
Excellent advice. But, what's going to happen to me?
She asked. You have to stay in the brig until we get to the station, for security reasons.
Security reasons?
She said with a snort.
It's just so I don't feel like I got away with something. I'm sure some old guy with a stick up his butt came up with that idea.
Moving on.
Well, when we get to Confederation Central, I'm supposed to be in charge of you, so please don't mess up or break any laws or get into trouble. I'm going to have enough to deal with. She held up her hands in surrender.
I swear I'll be good. Anyhow, on a different subject, they injected me with those translation devices. I guess so I could listen to that turtle goat man talk about how much he wishes my species didn't exist. Maybe I could get some reading material so that I can learn more about the Confederation before I get there. That way I won't be as likely to make any mistakes and get you into trouble.
I sighed. Fine, you win. I'll ask Urch if he'd be willing to get you a data bracelet. You'll find whatever you want on the network. I opened the door.
Hey, Zeke,
She said. I turned around.
sounds like I am on vacation.
She was laughing as I walked into the hallway. The blue plasma field covered the threshold and the door slid closed. As I walked away, Smelly said, "Her biological signs indicate she's not telling the truth." I stopped. About what? I blurted out before thinking to check and see if anyone was around. Fortunately, I was still alone.
About liking you?
It said, imitating Alice's voice. Well, she'll get over it.